Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Batra daf Kuf Yud Daled. This is the daf for the first day of Sukkot. Chag Sameach. We're going to get started with a review of daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Bet. So we saw that Rabbi Bar Chanina brought a brayta in front of Rav Nachman, the darshan, this pasuk, the pasuk that starts talking about how the nachala goes from the son, from a person who dies, where the nachala goes, who gets what, and really father to his sons. And then it says, but it's the pasuk starts out Vaya biyom hanchila panav, on the day that a father passes on his Yerusha to his son. So the Braita says, what do you learn from here? You pass on Yerusha during the day and not at night. Which Abaye said when he heard this, I don't understand. If somebody dies during the day, so his sons get his inheritance, but if he dies at night, they don't. What does that mean? To which Abaye suggests maybe you were referring to the following Braita, which talked about that because it also says in the Pesukim about the Yerusha, Hayta l'bnei Yisrael l'chukat mishpat, that this is coming to teach you that you have to distribute the property with judges. And then, like Rav Yehuda said, once it's like a judgment happens during the day and not at night. And therefore, the following halacha comes out according to Rav Yehuda. The Rav Yehuda said, we're going now to 3 lines from the bottom of Kuf Yud Gimel. We'll read inside. 3 people came to visit a sick person, meaning someone who was dying. Ratzu kotvim, ratzu osim din. They could, because they're 3 people, they could either write it down and then be witnesses to what this person said. There's an assumption here we're going to get to on today's daf that the Rashbam says we must be talking about the person didn't give away all their property, because otherwise the person could always change their mind. They gave away part of their property and they did a kinyan. Did the person on their deathbed, raised a handkerchief, did some sort of symbolic kinyan to show seriousness of purpose. Then the 3 people can write this down and it's basically a done deal. It has to be brought to a court, or they could function as the court themselves, in which case it's done, finished, sealed, and that's it. The sons can't go say, oh, we don't agree with this distribution, or start fighting about it because it was as if it was done in court. And that's because 3 people can function as a court. Shnayim kotvim ve'enosim din. If it's 2 people, they can write it down, but they can't function as the court because, right, it's just testimony. Because 3 people, you need 3 people for a court, not 2. Ve'amar Rav Chisda lo shanu ela bayom aval balayla. Now this idea that those 3 people, when we went back to the 3 case, 3 people can function as judges, that's only if they were with the sick person who said this and did the kinyan during the daytime. Then they can immediately function as a court instead of as witnesses. But balayla afilu shlosha kotvim ve'enosim din. But if they saw this all at night, they're basically witnesses because they can't be judges. So what could they do? Theoretically, in the morning, they could say, oh, now we're going to judge based on what we saw yesterday. But what's the problem? They can't do that because of a different halacha. My time, dahavalu edim ve'ein eidna said dayan. Well, they already now are witnesses. When they come the next morning, let's say Saturday night, the person does this kinyan. Sunday morning, they wake up, they say, oh, we saw this person do the kinyan yesterday. On basis of that, we're going to sit and function as a court. They can't do that. Why can't they do that? Because when they come right now, when they're coming on Sunday morning, they're functioning as witnesses. They're saying, yesterday, we saw the following thing happen. Well, then they're witnesses. A witness can't turn into a judge. A witness can't become a judge. Why? Because the judge, okay, we'll get to this sugya. We saw it in Rosh Hashanah. We're going to see it again in Sanhedrin. That's really where the main sugya is, what we're talking about. Witnesses and judges and what's needed, and we'll delve much more into the sugya then. But basically, if a witness has to come before judges. You can't have the same people be the witnesses and the judges. If that's not a good court system. You need to have people who come and testify and people who are judges. Now, in the case where they saw it, they can immediately function as judges. You don't even need witnesses. But when they come the next day, because it happened at night when they couldn't judge, they're coming as witnesses and as judges. And you can't both be a witness and a judge. There's a whole sugya that talks about that 2 people that saw someone kill someone can't be judges. And that is, even if they're not functioning as the witnesses, they can't be judges in a case because they saw the murder and they can't really be impartial in any way. That's a different thing, and that most commentaries say is really only in dine nefashot cases, in capital punishment cases, not in dine mamonot. In dine mamonot, if they saw, they could immediately function as court, like here, but they can't be both the witnesses and the judges. So Abaye, let's go back to where we were. Abaye basically says to Rabba bar Chanina, could this be what you're referring to when you said that? And basically, Rabba says, oh yeah, Amar le'in, hachanami kamina. Oh yeah, that's exactly what I meant in the Braita. When I said this Braita that Bayom atamapil nachalot and not at night, I didn't mean if someone dies at night, they can't give inheritance to their sons. What I meant is if three people heard someone while they're on their deathbed talk about where they want to pass on their stuff to their sons, those three people can't function as judges if they heard it at night. Okay, they can't rule in that case at all. They can't be judges. They can be witnesses, but not judges. Itmar. And again, this all goes back to that nothing is done in a court at night. There is no court holding at night, and therefore they couldn't be the court, and therefore they turned into witnesses. Once you're a witness, you can't become a judge. Itmar. Now we're going to get off topic, although we'll see in a minute how this connects. Kinyan ad ematai chose. Kinyan chalipin, as I said before, kinyan sudar, which is a symbolic act of kinyan, is different than an actual kinyan of lifting, passing, pulling. If you actually have the object in hand, it's a done deal. You can't renege. But a symbolic, okay, which, nowadays you might say handshake, is meant to have a little bit of a window of changing your mind. And the question of this sugya is going to be, what's that window? So we're going to have a machloka, and then I'll explain a little bit better. Rabba amal kozman sheyoshvin. Rav Yosef amar kozman sheoskim ba'oto inyan. Rabba says, as long as we're still sitting at the table, we could be dealing with other issues already, moved on to a different topic. But if we're still sitting at the table, we haven't gotten up yet, and I did this kinyan sudar, I picked up a handkerchief, I got to change my mind. What's the reason? The reason is because there's an assumption that when I picked it up, it's not the moment I lift it. It's when we finish the discussion, meaning that there's a built-in assumption, and this, I guess, is part of what was going on in their society, that when you do this kind of transaction, you're kind of saying, okay, this is going to be formal, but it's going to be formalized when we finish our discussion. So as long as we haven't finished our discussion or finished sitting here, okay, according to Rabba, it's finished sitting. According to Rav Yosef, it's kozman sheoskim ba'oto inyan. So as long as we're on the same topic, if we move topics, but we're still sitting, Rav Yosef says it's already too late. Meaning that when we pick up the handkerchief, it's saying that by the time we finish this conversation, that's when it's going to go into effect. So as long as it hasn't gone into effect yet, because we haven't finished talking about this topic, or we haven't gotten up yet, according to Rabba, you can still change your mind about it because it's not a done deal. Amar Rav Yosef. Now here comes the connection to our sugya. Rav Yosef says, Kavatei didi mistabra, I'll further prove what I said. From where? To Amar Rav Yehuda, from what Rav Yehuda said. Because what did Rav Yehuda say that we just quoted? Here's where the Rashbam says, what happened? The chole gave away part of their property, because if they gave away all their property, they can always change their mind about it, because let's say they live, they didn't want to give away all their property. But if they already said, I'm giving away some of my property, and this one goes to this, and this one goes to this one, and this one goes to that one, and it's just part of their property, and they did a kinyan, like a kinyan chalipin, picking, or a kinyan sudar, picking up a handkerchief. So, Ratzu Kotvin, Ratzu Osim Din, they can function as judges. Now, comes Rav Yosef and says, Isa Gadata Kozman Sheyoshvin. If you think that as long as they're still sitting here, well, they can always, the person on their deathbed can change their mind. Lichush Doma Hadarbe. Then we're assuming when these three people sit in judgment about this, they're sitting right there at the same place and they're still sitting. So, aren't we worried that if you basically say the kinyan sudar isn't effective until they get up, so as long as they haven't gotten up, how could they rule about this? Rule is making a final. But if the person on their deathbed, according to Rabba, can still change their mind as long as everyone hasn't gotten up yet, well then, the person on their deathbed can still change their mind. How could these three people make a judgment which is basically irreversible? To which Rav Ashi says, I'm Rav Ashi, I'm Marita Lishmate Kamei Rav Kahana. I brought this in front of Rav Kahana. Ula Rav Yosef minicha, and I said the following. Wait, Rav Yosef himself doesn't make sense. In other words, Rav Yosef is raising a question against Rabba, but really it's the same question against Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef also said there's a window in which you can change your mind, maybe a little shorter window. But Rav Yosef still said the dead person could the person dying could change their mind as long as they're still talking about the same topic. In which case, so what's the only way to explain it according to Rav Yosef? And why didn't Rav Yosef think this was difficult according to his own opinion? Disliku, we're now turning to Amud Bet. Disliku meinyana linyana. It must be that the three people can go in judgment about this and be the judges here as long as they switch topics. Once they move topics, then obviously the person can't change their mind. And that's how Rav Yosef would read this. Well, on that same note, Hachinami dekamu v'hadar yativu. It would be the same thing with for Rabba. Rabba could say that, and that's not the same thing, but let's make it parallel for Rabba. We'd say Rabba would answer that it's when they got up, once they got up and then sat back down again, then already they're not sitting anymore. And then, as they are sitting, but they stopped, they broke from the first sitting, in which case only then could they be judges, and therefore it's not a difficulty against Rabba. Now, despite the fact that the difficulty of Rav Yosef was resolved, that Rav Yosef raised against Rabba was resolved, still the Gemara says, Hilchata kavatei Rav Yosef b'sadeh inyan umechza. The halacha is like Rav Yosef on three issues. They all happen to be in our Masechet. Tosfot says that means perhaps, Tosfot at least suggests, maybe it means only in the cases in our Masechet we're talking about, cases where Rav Yosef, we hold like him, or maybe it means all around, and these are the only, and it's either it's saying in our Masechet, these are the only three cases we hold like Rav Yosef, or perhaps it means these are the only three cases we hold like Rav Yosef. There's a bit of a debate among the commentaries how to read this. But let's explain the three cases, and then we'll go back to this statement about we paskin like Rav Yosef only in these three things. Bisadeh, inyan umechza. Inyan is ours, which is once you switch topics, inyan is a topic. Once you switch topics, then already you can't change your mind. And we hold like Rav Yosef against Rabba. The first one is sadeh, which was also machloket with Rabba. The Rashbam quotes it. It's on Daf Yud Bet Amud Bet, where Rav Yosef said if there's brothers that are dividing up inheritance, and one brother says, if you remember, we learned the laws of bar metzra, that the neighbor gets first dibs on the property when the neighbor's selling it, when the person with their next door field. What if you're getting inheritance and one brother says, hey, this inheritance, one of the fields borders on my field. I want to keep that field. The other brothers, according to Rabbah, have to acquiesce because otherwise it's kofin amidat stom. It's just cruel to not give the brother that property. Rav Yosef says, what do you mean? The brothers could say, okay, and I'm reading from the Rashbam here, who's quoting the Gemara in Yud Ben Amud Bet, the brothers could say, what do you mean? You're taking the best property, and that property has much better quality than the others, and we're not letting you have that. And that's not called kofin amidat stom, because we don't force the brothers to be nice and give them the newer property, because perhaps it's getting a better property, and therefore they don't have to let this happen. So we hold like Rav Yosef on that issue. The mechza issue is actually interesting because it's not a debate between Rabba and Rav Yosef. It's just Rav Yosef. Abaye actually brings a difficulty, raises a difficulty, and Rav Yosef answers it, but perhaps because it was a difficulty raised, some people maybe thought we didn't hold like Rav Yosef, but comes the Gemara to say we hold like Rav Yosef there too. Okay, what's mechza? So we didn't learn this yet. It's on Daf Kuf Mem Gimel. The Rashbam quotes it. Lekama b'mishamet. That's the name of the chapter. Hahuda amar l'tebitu nichse lach u'liberech. Somebody says to his wife, I'm giving you and my sons the property to divide. Now, there's two ways you can divide it. Let's say the person has 4 sons and the wife. So does the wife get a fifth and the brothers each get a fifth? Or does the wife get half and the brothers divide the other half? So Rav Yosef says the wife gets half and the brothers divide the other half. And Abaye asks a question on this and Rav Yosef answers. So these are the 3 cases we hold like Rav Yosef. So what are the issues here? Well, again, in 2 of them, it's against Rabba. And really, we generally hold like Rabba, certainly when it comes to Dinei Mamonot. In fact, we're going to see in the next daf that either Rabba or Shmuel is compared to the Shabur Malka. Shabur Malka is the Persian king. Why are they compared to the Persian king? Because the Persian king made rulings everybody kept. So Rabba and Shmuel were known to be the ones to rule by in financial issues. So perhaps that's why they're telling you that specifically in these issues, we hold like Rav Yosef, but otherwise we always held like Rabba. The Tosfot raises the issue that also you might have thought in the case where Abaye raises a difficulty with Rav Yosef. Often Abaye questions Rav Yosef because Rav Yosef later in life started forgetting things. And maybe there's a concern that you might have thought that Abaye questioned. It's true Rav Yosef answered, but maybe Abaye was correct because he was often reminding Rav Yosef of things that Rav Yosef forgot in his youth. And maybe that was a reason to think that we wouldn't hold like him. And that's why they're specifically telling you, despite that, we actually hold like Rav Yosef on that issue. Okay, moving on to the next section. Ha'isha et binat. We're now going back to the Mishna. The Mishna gave, okay, and really it's a little bit tricky, or not tricky, but there's a lot of repetition in the Mishnah. The Mishnah gave 4 categories: nochalim u'manchilim, nochalim v'lo manchilim, manchilim v'lo nochalim, and lo nochalim v'lo manchilim. These 4 options. Now, the ones that are nochalim v'lo manchilim, they pass on inheritance. They inherit, but they don't pass on inheritance, or to one person to another. We'll see exactly in a minute who it is. I'm on the Mishnah Daf Kufchet. Or manchilim v'lo nochalim is the exact reverse, right? It's they pass on property, but they don't inherit, right? So, it's kind of obvious that whichever direction that goes, if it doesn't go in the reverse direction, then the other one's going to be the reverse of this. And that's why the Mishnah really repeats it, because it's giving 4 categories and has to kind of fill in all the cases, even though really one is the flip of the other. Okay? If it's not clear, you'll see it in a minute inside. So I'm going to read the 3 cases, and then we'll read the other 3 cases, and you'll see why they're each the reverse of the other. Ha'ish etimo, a man to his mother. Okay, a man inherits from his mother, but doesn't pass on inheritance to his mother. That's case number 1 in the second section in the Mishnah. Now, the third section of the Mishnah, what's case number 1? Ha'isha b'na, mother to her son. A mother passes on her inheritance to her son, but she doesn't inherit the son. Now, this is the exact reverse of Ha'isha timo. A man to his mother is the same relationship as a mother to her son, right? Because that's the man to the mother. And basically, it's just one is talking about the man as the subject, and one is talking about the woman as the subject, right? The son or the mother. The son to the mother, and the mother to the son. It's one and the same. So again, the son to the mother will inherit her, but not pass on inheritance to her. And the mother to the son will pass on inheritance to her son, but not inherit. So that's the reverse. Ha'ishet ishto, a husband to his wife. And obviously the reverse is ha'isha ba'ala, a woman to her husband. It's the exact flip. The husband inherits the wife, but the wife doesn't pass on his inheritance to the wife. And isha ba'ala, same thing. She passes on her inheritance to the husband, but doesn't inherit the husband. And b'nei achayot versus the achim mina'im. That's also one and the same. B'nei achayot are, or b'not achot, the way we're going to see later, the Gemara is going to say it. B'nei achot, the sons of sisters, meaning the sister, okay, if a sister dies, and theoretically she should inherit from her brother, then the brother's inheritance, let's say he doesn't have sons, daughters, father, brothers, goes to the sister. And from there, since the sister's dead, her sons will inherit through her. So it goes from uncle to nephew, but the nephew's possessions, since son doesn't pass on inheritance to the mother, so the uncle from the mother's, right, the mother's brother is not going to inherit. If she's dead, let's say, and he has no one else to give to, it won't go to the uncle. It'll go to some other relative of the mother's. Okay, next. Sorry, it won't go to the relative of the mother's, my mistake. It'll go to a relative of the son. In other words, it'll go to someone, right? Since the son doesn't pass on inheritance to the mother, so it won't go to the mother and from there to her brother. It'll go to some other relative of the son. We'll go through the order of all the people who inherit the son. And the same, again, it's the same thing as achei ha'im, the brothers of the mother. The brothers of the mother, manchilim, they pass on inheritance through their sister to the son, meaning to the nephew, but they won't inherit from the nephew. So it's exactly the same thing. To which the Gemara asks, hatanale resha, hatulamali, why do we need to say we're now on the third section of the Mishnah, which we just read. Why do you need the third section if you already have the second section? It's all repetitive. To which, right? Hatana lereisha. It already said. Ha'isha b'na. It already said. Isha timo. And isha, right? Isha ba'ala. It says ha'isha ishto. Right. So it's all the same. So ha'kamash malan. What's the reason why we repeat this? We actually don't need it for the third case of the b'nei achot or the acheimo. But since we already did the other two, we add this one. Why do we need the other two? They wanted to give you these two cases in our third section of the Mishnah, Isha bina and Isha ba'ala, a woman to her son and a woman to her husband, because they wanted to teach you that there's a similarity. Now, what the similarity is up for debate among the commentaries, how to understand this. And I'll read you the Rashbam's and I'll point out the difficulty with the Rashbam's commentary, but I won't give you alternative ones, but you could read about alternative ones. I don't want to confuse you too much. We'll go with the Rashbam, but we'll point out the weakness in the Rashbam's commentary. Ma'isha ba'ala, just like a woman with her husband. Now we're going to compare. We're going to learn something from a woman and her husband to a woman and her son. Ma'isha ba'ala, that relationship, ein habal yoreshet ishto bekever. We learned this on Daf. Okay, again, this is the Rashbam's commentary that we're referring to something we learned on the previous Daf on Kuf Yud Gimel, that when a woman dies before her husband, she predeceases her husband, he'll inherit everything she has, but not things. Let's say her father's still alive and there's no brothers. So when the father dies, she should theoretically get the father's inheritance. But since she's already dead, you would think maybe that it would go to her and through, even though she's dead, it'll go to her husband, which is who would inherit her. But no, he's not Yoresh Dishto, Bakever. Bakever here means when she's in the kever. Okay, if she's already dead, anything that she inherits after her death, like, for example, her father dying, will not go to the husband. It'll go to other relatives. We'll skip the daughter, right, the woman here, and we'll give it to a different relative. So just like that's the case, which we saw on the previous page, Af Isha et Bina, now it's going to be a little different. A woman with her son, Ein haben yoreshet imo bakever, hanchil achim mina'av. Now in this case, it's not, according to the Rashbam anyway, it's not that the woman is in the kever, okay, even though it says ein yoreshet imo bakever, and a minute ago we said the husband doesn't inherit the mother when the mother is in the kever, when the woman's in the kever, the wife, when the woman's in the kever. But ein haben yoreshet imo bakever means if the son dies, and let's say the son has brothers through his father, not through his mother. Now, when the son dies, the mother's still alive. Now, theoretically, when the mother dies, it should go to the son. If the son has children, it'll go to the son's children. But if the son doesn't have children, you might think it would go to the son's brothers through his father because they inherit from him, even though they're not related to the mother at all. Comes this to say, no, it won't go to his brothers through his father, who aren't related to the mother at all. It won't. It'll skip that stage of the children and it'll go somewhere else, because he's already dead. And that's the idea here, that there's a comparison, again, a very different one, about things that don't go through when someone is dead. And that's what they want to learn from the fact that these cases are mentioned. Again, there's different ways to commentaries on what exactly we're learning one from the other, and some kind of resolve the problem of the Rashbam, but again, every commentary always has weakness, so we'll stick with the Rashbam and at least just mention the weakness of that commentary. Now we're going to have Rabbi Yochanan who quotes Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shimon, and then is going to raise a problem. The problem we'll see tomorrow, although the problem's very clear. Our Mishna said very clearly, a woman to her son, she passes on her inheritance to the son, but she does not inherit the son. But comes Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shimon, and says, and Rabbi Yochanan quotes him as saying this, Dvar Torah ha'av yoreshet b'no v'isha yoreshet et b'na. According to Torah law, a father passes on his, right, a father inherits the son, and the mother inherits her son as well. Okay. Where we're going to get this from in a minute, we'll see. But obviously, this totally contradicts the Mishnah, because we said the mother doesn't inherit the son. So how is he going to get away with saying this? We're going to have to wait for the next stuff to understand. But let's see where he gets this from in the Torah, and with that, we'll finish for today. Shenema, matot. Okay, we're reading a pasuk here. It's Lamed Vav Chet in Bamidbar. Any daughter who inherits from the tribes of Israel. Now, the way they understand tribes would mean, what do you mean? She inherits from one tribe, from her father's tribe. Why does it say mother's tribe? Well, makish mateha av le'mateha em. We want to say here there's a similarity between the tribe of the mother and the tribe of the father. What is that? Ma mateha av yoreshet b'no. Like in the father's tribe, the father inherits from the son. Af mateha em isha yoreshet et b'na. Likewise, we could have a situation where the mother inherits from the son. Let's say there's no father. There's no sons and there's no daughters. Then it goes to the father. And there's no father, it goes to the mother. And that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion as quoted by Rabbi Yochanan. To which we're going to see, Rabbi Yochanan's going to immediately question, it says exactly the opposite of that in our Mishnah. It says, Isha Bina, right? She passes on inheritance in, but she's not Nochel. She doesn't get inheritance from the son. So how can you possibly say that? We'll have to wait and see. What does Rabbi Yehuda respond? So what do we have today? Nicely, a very short daf, especially for those keeping 3 days of Chag. The other dapim are already up for the weekend, so that's helpful. So now what did we do today? We started with this issue of you don't inherit at night. And what does that mean? You don't inherit at night. And we ended up saying it means if 3 people heard something Shchim Mira said on his deathbed and did a kinyan about it, and they want to function as judges, they cannot do that if they heard it at night, because then they become the witnesses, and the witness can't be the judge. And then we brought up this thing about how long can you change your mind about a kinyan chalipin, and Rav Yosef tried to prove his opinion from that statement of Rav Yehuda that had said about the 3 people that had become judges. How could they become judges if the person could still change their mind? To which we said, oh, that's not a difficulty on Rabba. Also, Rav Yosef, both of them would have to explain it that it must be only beyond that time that each of them said, either standing up or moving topics. Then we got to the fact that we paskin like Rav Yosef on this issue, 2 other issues in our Masachet. And then we went to the Shat Binah, why it repeats in the 3rd category, it repeats the same things that were in the 2nd category in the reverse, but they really all mean the same thing. And it was all to teach you about this unique law that when someone dies, either the woman dies or the son dies, but we're talking about inheritance from a woman, or in each case, there was a woman somehow involved. We're going to do a comparison there, and the husband doesn't inherit stuff from the woman that she was supposed to inherit when she's dead already. And likewise, the mother doesn't pass on through the son to his own brothers if the son is already dead. And we ended with this weird, strange halacha that Rabbi Yehuda comes out with all of a sudden about a mother doesn't inherit the son. Again, in a case where there's no kids and there's no father, the mother would inherit, and we're going to have to deal with that in the next class. Wishing everyone a Chag Sameach.